He stood there, motionless on the weathered wooden porch, where the late afternoon sun slid gently across the faded shoulder of his old uniform. The jacket no longer held its crisp lines. The insignia had dulled, but he kept it, the way a man holds onto a part of himself that time tried to erase. A soft breeze swept across the open field beyond, carrying the scent of earth after rain, a smell that pulled him back to the first day he ever put that uniform on. That day, no one from his family came to see him off. That boy, a soldier? He couldn't tell east from west, he remembered the neighbor saying. But worse than all the laughter was his older brother's voice in the hallway. You'll quit after a week. You've never finished anything in your life. He didn't argue. He just lowered his head, packed a few changes of clothes and a small Bible, and slipped out before the sun rose. Back then, he was small, slow, quiet. No one thought he was fast enough to shoot, strong enough to carry weight, or bold enough to survive the field. Someone even muttered once that one could make it as a kitchen hand. And to be honest, sometimes he believed them. The cold, the hunger, the ache in his back each morning on a steel-framed bed. There were nights he'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, thinking. Maybe they were right. But he didn't go back. Not out of pride. Not because of some grand dream of becoming a hero. He stayed because he was used to not being believed in. And this time, he refused to let them be right again. Some people hearing this might pause, especially those who've lived long enough to know what it feels like to grow up in someone else's shadow. To be judged by the way you walk, the grades you got, or the job you failed to keep. He wasn't born a warrior. He was just a man who didn't let go even when the world let go of him. And that was only the beginning. They assigned me to the kitchen, not because I volunteered, but because I was too slow in the drills, not accurate enough with the rifle, not strong enough to haul ammo like the bigger boys fresh out of high school. I remember clearly the look on Sergeant Wallace's face when he reviewed my first week's report. He nodded once, capped his pen, and tucked it back into his chest pocket. He didn't need to say a word. I knew exactly what he was thinking. I was put on mess hall duty washing trays, scrubbing floors every evening. While the rest of the guys laughed over poker games or PT drills, I'd be crouched in the corner of the kitchen, rubber gloves on, pants soaked from soap water. Every now and then someone would pass by and throw me a nickname, Private Dishwasher. It sounded lighthearted, even funny, but it cut deeper than they knew. No one had to call me useless to my face. The silence, the stares, and the quiet laugh behind my back said it all. At night, after work, I'd sit alone on the lower bunk. No one talked to me after dinner. No one asked me to stay for extra shooting practice. I didn't complain, didn't call home. I had nothing to say, really. Nothing but blisters on my hands, and a single thought repeating in my head. Do I even belong here? I remember one night when it rained hard. The tin roof above my bunk leaked. Water tapped a slow, mocking rhythm on the corner of my bed. I turned to the wall and pulled the blanket over my head, and somewhere in the dark I cried. Not because I was weak, but because I was tired. Tired of trying so hard and being seen by no one. Tired of waking up every day just to prove I deserved the right to wear the same uniform as them. And most of all tired because I had started to believe what they said about me. But then, something happened. Something that changed everything. It was a Tuesday morning, hot and bright. We were on a supply run, moving through a narrow stretch of desert where radio signals always cut out. I sat in the last vehicle, tasked with tracking inventory and staying out of the way. No one expected anything from me, and truthfully, I didn't expect much either. I just wanted to stay in line, do the job, not mess up. We were about 5 miles from the checkpoint when the explosion hit. The lead vehicle gone in a flash. Dust and debris filled the air. Gunfire cracked from the hills. Panic. Screaming. The comms were down. Sergeant Wallace, the man who never once said my name, without a sigh was hit. He dropped near the second truck, blood pouring fast from a wound I didn't even see happen. I froze, maybe for a second. But in that second, something clicked. I didn't think about myself. Didn't think about the nickname. Didn't think about the scrub brushes or the jokes or the feeling of being invisible. I moved. I crawled for my truck. kept low in the dirt, heading towards Sergeant Wallace. A round whizzed past my ear close enough to feel the heat. But I kept going. I dragged him back behind the engine block, grit grinding into my knees and elbows. Blood from his shoulders soaked into my sleeve. Up ahead, Private Parker was trapped under a blown tire. I lunged forward, grabbed his belt, and yanked hard. A bullet pinged off the fender inches away. I tossed him for the last rifle he hadn't used. I didn't even know if he could still shoot, but it was all I had. Then came Johnson's shot in the leg. Struggling to crawl, I hauled him onto my back. Every step across that burning sand felt like walking through fire. There was no cover, no backup, just the sound of my boots pounding dirt and the hope that I could outrun death for another minute. We reached the checkpoint just as the sun began to dip. I collapsed on the floorboards, my knees bleeding, palms blistered, back soaked with sweat, but Johnson was breathing. They were all breathing. When the medics took him inside, I sat down on the wooden steps of the field station, shoulders heavy, hands trembling. For the first time in my military life, I didn't feel like dead weight. Nobody said anything that night. They didn't have to. The looks were different. No more mockery. No more turning away. There was a silence among the men who used to see through me, and in that silence, something new was born. 3 days later, I woke up in a field hospital south of the base. Everything was hazy. The canvas walls glowed softly with sunlight pushing through from outside. My right arm was wrapped tight. My leg still numb. I couldn't recall the full story, just fragments. The explosion, the screaming, the weight of Johnson slumped across my shoulders, the way Parker looked at me when I shoved him behind cover. I lay there with my head pounding, unsure if it was the morphine or the weight of my own doubts. I asked myself, did that really happen? Was it just chance? Or did I finally do something that mattered? Then the flap opened. A tall man stepped inside. Calm, solid. His uniform was pressed so crisp it looked untouched by wind or sand. 3 silver stars glinted on his chest, a sight I'd only seen in newspapers or award ceremonies, never in person. He didn't smile, didn't ask how I felt, didn't deliver a speech or hand me a medal. He simply stood there, silent for a few moments. Then he leaned down, close enough that I could feel the weight in his words before he spoke. His voice was low, steady. Men like you win wars. My hand tightened, almost instinctively, around the dog tag resting against my chest. That small strip of metal suddenly felt heavier, as if it now carried meaning, not just a name. My eyes burned, not from pain, but because in that moment someone finally saw me. Not for what I wasn't, but for what I had done. That one sentence, simple, as it was unraveled years of silence and doubt. All the names they called me: failure, weak, useless, faded like dust after a good rain. There was no ceremony, no applause, just that one look, that one sentence, and I knew I had become part of something greater than myself. No more proving, no more chasing validation, just a quiet knowing that I had been there, and I mattered. These days, I don't run through fire anymore. I stand on a training ground, watching younger boots take their first steps. I teach the quiet ones, the unsure ones, the ones who fall behind during that first evaluation. Because I've learned sometimes the ones they doubt the most are the ones who end up carrying the rest. I don't have much to show, just this story and the scars I carry, more in the heart than on the skin. If you've ever been overlooked, if you've ever swallowed your pain and kept moving anyway, if you've ever stood at the edge only to one day walk into the center, then this story is yours, too. Old Soldier Story is a place to preserve those memories and pass them on, to remind the next generation that quiet strength still matters, and second chances are worth everything. If that message means something to you, hit subscribe and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. We don't all wear medals, but we all carry something that deserves to be remembered.